Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I really appreciate the chance to speak here for SCORE tonight. Bill gave me a very excellent introduction, but one thing he didn't say, and I think it's most relevant for our program this evening, is that for the last 20 years, I have been working out of my spare bedroom. I have been working in my bunny slippers. I, too, am a home office entrepreneur. For most of those last 20 years, I have been naked. No, I'm only kidding about that part of it, of course, but I seriously, I do tend to work in my pajamas, and, you know, when I'm not all that busy, I sometimes don't shave for like a week, you know, that kind of thing. It's I tease people, actually, I give programs for lawyers, and I tell them that I run the first clothing optional law practice in the New England states. And there may be a few of these in California, I don't know. But I actually have I have a lock on it. I have the only clothing optional law practice here in New England, and I'm looking for associates. No, I'm only kidding about that. But seriously, home office and home businesses, and those are two different things. We're going to talk about the difference between those two things in a few minutes. But working out of the home has become the way that most people work here in the United States. The U.S. Department of Labor tells us that there are approximately 11 million home offices in the United States today. And if you think about it, that's pretty profound. That's about 1 in every 30 Americans works out of their home. And those are only the ones that the Department of Labor knows about. I got to believe that for every one they know about, there's 2 or 3 that they don't know about. So I strongly suspect that the number of home offices in this country is very, very large. And why is that important? Well, I'll tell you something that's very funny. There's about 11 million home offices in the United States, and yet technically the vast majority of them are illegal, which is a very, very interesting development indeed. And we'll explain why that is in a couple of minutes. But let's get started here. First of all, I expect you all to read that in 5 seconds or less. That's a lot of fine print. I apologize. Now you know that I am a lawyer, okay? Because like what lawyers do is we always tell you what we're not going to tell you before we tell you what we're going to tell you. The most important one here is the first one here. We are going to get into some legal and tax stuff. I'm going to talk about the home office deduction a little bit later on. I'm going to be talking about the zoning issues of working out of your home. But what I cannot do is I cannot give you one-on-one advice. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that you have at the end of this program, but this is general information only. I don't know any of you well enough to be able to give you one-on-one advice as to how you should handle a specific situation. So just keep that in mind. This is no substitute. A program like this is no substitute for the kind of advice that you would get from a lawyer or an accountant that you have hired and that you are working with one-on-one. So that's the most important thing. Sooner or later, you will be working from home. If you're not working at home already, sooner or later, you will be. More than 10 million home offices in the U.S. Business trends favor home office employment. With today's technology, you can work anywhere. My clients don't even know where I am. All of my work these days is done by phone, by fax, by email, occasionally by text. I could be in Missouri, I can be in Nevada. Very frequently I speak around the country and I do work on my laptop from the airport. My clients don't even know that. It's totally transparent. You don't have to be anywhere. Our technology has untethered us from the physical bounds of time and space. We also are entering something which I like to call the virtual economy, or the 1099 of America. You will not see in 5 or 10 years people working in corporate headquarters working up a hierarchical ladder. What we used to call the corporate pyramid is very rapidly disappearing. What we're seeing now is a flattening or a hollowing out, depending on how you want to look at it, of the corporate world. Fewer layers of management, people working at all kinds of different locations. Smaller businesses especially do not want to invest a lot in a brick and mortar space. It's very expensive, especially here in the Northeast where we're giving this presentation now. Commercial space in the town where I am right now is about $70, $80 a square foot. A lot of companies don't want to pay that, so they're perfectly happy to let workers work out of their home. They're hiring more people on a 1099. Remember the lava lamps from the 1970s? Remember what a lava lamp was, okay? The blobs of liquid, going. That's what the world of work is going to look like now. We're not going to be seeing big organizations with pyramid structures. What we're going to be seeing now going forward is sort of free-forming teams of people that will get together, they'll work on a project or two for a while, and then they'll kind of drift off, and this group will go on this way, and they'll mix up with somebody else, and that other group will go this way. Picture the circulation of fluids in a lava lamp, and that's what the world of work is going to be looking like in another 5 or 10 years. And that, obviously, I personally work with several virtual companies where they don't have any physical space at all. It's 5 people, they're all working out of their home offices, and every once in a while they get together at a diner and compare, whatever it is that they're working on. This is becoming more and more of a trend. Also, too, the blurring of work and private life. It's no secret now that even if you work for a large company, it's 24/7 now. It is. The old days of working 9 to 5 or on a fixed schedule, all of that has gone the way of the dodo bird. People now are working a little bit on Sundays. I usually work a couple of hours every Sunday, but I can also take some time off on Wednesday afternoon and get my dry cleaning. That's the beautiful part about working out of your home. It's not that you are working less hours or fewer hours. It's that you have a little bit more control over how you spend your time. But every day you'll be doing some work. Every day you'll be doing some play. Every day you'll be doing some study. And the desire to reduce overhead to rock bottom. Overhead has become a 4-letter word in corporate America. If you talk to any company, big, small, in the middle, they are all looking to cut their overhead to rock bottom. And anything that saves them money, especially on brick and mortar space, they will take advantage of. Okay? When we talk about home-based offices, though, I think it's important to stress we're talking about different kinds of people. Okay? First of all, a lot of self-employed people like me. I'm a solo. I work alone. I don't have staff. I don't have an assistant. I don't have a paralegal. I don't have a dog. It's just me and my PC. Contractors work that way. I mean, they may be working on your house, but all their office stuff is being handled from a home office. These people do not rent space in commercial buildings or in strip malls anymore. So that's one category of people, the self-employed. Virtual companies, these are entrepreneurial startups with networked homed offices. These are people who are working in different locations. Sometimes they are in different states. Sometimes they are in different countries. I work actually with a lot of foreign students who are over here in this country on temporary visas who have set up companies with friends of theirs back in their home countries, and they communicate entirely via Skype or some other electronic means of communication. They don't even see each other for years and years, and yet they are setting up a company together and working together. Part-timers, these are people who are stay-at-home parents, but they have a part-time business. A lot of people sell on eBay, they sell on Amazon. These are, I call them part-timers. These are people who have a job, they have child care responsibilities, but they spend a few hours a day doing something to bring in a little extra income on the side. And then last but not least, we have telecommuters. These are fully employed people. These are not entrepreneurs. These are not solos. These are not self-employed people. These are people who do work for a company, but for the convenience of their employer, they are allowed to work out of a home office 1 or 2 days, maybe several days a week. Those are 4 very different kinds of people, and they have different kinds of needs. The only thing they have in common, quite frankly, is that they work from a home office. Okay, so can you work out of your home? Well, there are a number of people who may not let you. Your local zoning regulations may not let you. I said a few minutes ago that virtually almost all of the home offices in America, all of those 11, 12 million home offices that we talked about, are technically illegal. And why? Because virtually every community in the United States has some kind of a zoning law, which basically, it's actually a map. It's not really a law, it's a map. It divides your town into different districts, and it basically says, okay, the homes are over here, the businesses are over here, the factories are over there, and the schools over there, and the reservoirs over there. That's what a zoning law basically does. And the cardinal rule of zoning is, and has always been since the 1950s, 1960s, when zoning laws first became popular, you cannot have a business in a residential zone, in a zone that is, in a district that is zoned residential. And there are certain exceptions to that. So for example, some dentists are allowed to work out of their homes. Some visiting nurses obviously can work out of their homes. There's always been a few exceptions like that, but the exceptions have been few and far between. Since the 1970s, with the explosion of the home office revolution, a lot of these laws are very antiquated, and very few of towns and communities have brought their zoning laws in compliance with modern times. Okay. Secondly, your nosy neighbors may not let you. And this sounds funny, but it really isn't. We're going to talk about this a little bit more later on. One of the biggest problems you have when you have a home office, quite frankly, is your neighbors. Some of you remember there was a TV show called Bewitched back in the 1960s, and one of the characters, this was a woman who was technically a witch who married a guy, and she was doing all kinds of crazy stuff out of her house, and the next door neighbor knew that something weird, her name was Gladys Kravitz. Remember Gladys Kravitz? She knew that something weird was going on, so she was always poking around, sticking her nose in the windows, trying to find out what Samantha and her witch buddies were all up to, and stuff like that. It was a very popular show back in the 1960s. Elizabeth Montgomery, one of my very first crushes as a boy. We will not go there, however. But your nosy neighbors can be a problem. Any problems that you have with a home office are going to primarily be caused by your neighbors. And we're going to talk a bit later about how you deal with that. Your spouse or significant other may not let you. And this sounds, again, funny, but it's something we have to face up to. Not a lot of our spouses like the idea of clients traipsing up and traipsing through the house 24/7. They may not like the idea that you are constantly underfoot. They may not like the idea that you've been working in a corporate building now for years and years, and all of a sudden now you're in the house, you're underfoot, you're sticking your nose in the refrigerator every 10 minutes. They got all these people that she doesn't even know, looking at the antiques, and sometimes an antique goes missing. We're going to talk about that a little bit, about how you manage the home office. Your spouse may say, look, I'm not going to let you do this. I think you really need to be somewhere else. I don't want you in my hair all day long. So that's a conversation you need to have with your spouse. And then last but not least, your clients, your customers, your brand image may not let you. In certain types of businesses cannot operate from a home office, not because there's a legal issue with it, but just because it doesn't look right. I mean, let me just ask you this question. I'm a lawyer, okay? Let's say that I was a lawyer who did wills. I don't do wills mostly, but let's say that I did wills, trusts, and estate planning. So you hire me as your lawyer. You want me to put together an estate plan so that your kids, will not have to pay federal, state income taxes. I'm putting together a highly sophisticated estate plan. I invite you to my office. You're driving through a residential neighborhood. You come to my house, and there I am in my jeans and my cutaways and my T-shirt, and I'm playing Frisbee with my dog on the front lawn. Is this, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with any of that, but is that the professional image you want from the attorney who's going to put together your estate plan and handle your financial future? Do you really feel comfortable putting your life in the hands of somebody like that? The answer is probably not, which is one of the reasons I don't do wills, quite frankly, because I simply cannot do them from a home office. Okay, so before you consider working out of a big home office, there's a big fundamental question you have to ask. This is one of those dividing line questions. And to me, it's the biggest question of all, and the thing you have to spend most of your time thinking about. Will you see clients in the home office? Are you going to allow other people from the outside, clients, employees, whatever, to access your home and work on your premises? Okay, that is the big question. If you go one way, that dictates one set of actions. If you go the other way, it dictates another set of action. Here's my simple answer to the big question. When I see big questions, I like to make them simple. I believe you should not see clients in your home office. 95% of the problems you will ever have with the zoning authorities, your neighbors, your spouse, whoever may want to get in the way of you working out of the house, will happen because you're seeing other people on the premises. As long as it's just you, as long as it's just you working on your PC, taking a couple of phone calls in the spare bedroom, no one will have a problem with that. No one will have a problem with that. Everybody can do that, and no one will care, except maybe your spouse, because you're getting underfoot a little bit when you go to the refrigerator too many times. But we'll talk about that later. But most of the time, 95% of the problems you will have come about when you let other people access your house. That's where a lot of the legal liability comes about. That's where a lot of your resistance is going to come from, the people who really care. Okay, so I say, when in doubt, don't. Unless there's a compelling reason to see clients and employees in the office, do not do it. It will solve 95% of the problems you will ever have running your home office. Some people just say, as I say, oh, gee, why? Well, let's be honest. First of all, it makes you more visible to your neighbors and community, which makes it a much greater risk that you will have zoning problems, okay? Let me say this up front. We're going to talk about zoning laws a bit later, but let me tell you about the common sense here. There's the law and there's common sense. We're going to talk about the law a little bit later, but let me just take a minute here and talk about the common sense. I said a few minutes ago that virtually all home offices are illegal, meaning they technically violate the zoning laws. You are operating a business in an area that is zoned residential, which is a technical violation of the zoning laws. Now, that's the law. But here's the reality. You will never, ever have a problem with the zoning laws unless your business activities become so visible that people start to complain. That's the reality of this thing. Every town has a zoning code, but you know what? Very few towns have zoning cops. I mean, there's nobody in this town going door to door, knocking on doors. You got a business here, got a business here, got a business here. That's very 1984. That's what they do in, in authoritarian states, dictatorships. You have those kind of people. You don't have those here in the United States. Nobody's going around doing that. Nobody's going around looking to enforce the zoning laws in that way. The only time the zoning cops are going to find out about you is if your neighbors turn you in or if somebody rats on you. That's the only way it's going to happen. So if you conduct your business invisibly, you will almost certainly never have a problem operating your home office. Anything that you do that makes your business more visible increases the likelihood that you're going to have a problem with your local zoning authorities at some point, okay? That's one reason, that's the biggest reason, frankly, why I say don't see clients in the home. Second, there's an increased risk of slip and fall and dog bite liability. Your little Pomeranian, the world's most lovable dog, everybody loves them, all of a sudden decides to take a bite out of your client's ankle. If that happens on your property, that is something that you are legally liable for, and of course the dog, you'll deal with the dog in its own time, but I wouldn't want to be that dog too, either, if that ever happens. But also too, they're going to slip and fall. You have a little bit of water on the kitchen floor, it's linoleum still, you're living in the 1970s, somebody slips and falls on that, you're going to have a problem. Number three, not all clients and customers are nice people. Just because they're your client does not mean they're trustworthy. Little things around the house may go missing when you see clients in the home. And believe me, your spouse is really going to have a problem with that when they see that grandma's cherished Yadro figure is no longer in evidence, okay? And it's very hard to do. You cannot, it sounds funny, but it really is true. And that's a hard conversation to have with your client. Mr. Client, who is paying my rent this month by paying me this wonderful $10,000 fee, did you steal something from me when you were in my house last week? That's a very hard conversation to have with an important client. You really can. You're accusing that person of theft, and of course, if you're wrong, there's going to be consequences there. Although you'll probably be right. Your spouse or significant other will not want people traipsing through the house. Seriously, whenever you think about working out of the house, the first conversation you have to have is with your spouse. First conversation, take them, go on a retreat. My wife and I did this. When I moved into the house in my office, I had been living there before, but when I moved my office into the house in 1996, almost 20 years ago, my wife and I we did a weekend retreat. We went up to Vermont, near Dartmouth, where I went to undergrad, and we actually took like a 4-day weekend, and we talked a lot about how our life was going to be different with me working out of the spare bedroom. Now, fortunately, my wife was very supportive. She knew I wouldn't be seeing clients in the house. That was the big selling point there. But also, too, we talked about rules and regulations, and when I could access the refrigerator, when I couldn't. There are things that they care about that you probably don't know. So get your spouse on board. Get them involved early on is my message. Find out what the rules of the road are from them directly. And then, let's just be real. Do you really want your clients and customers to see how you live? Do you really want to show the piles of crap lying all over the place, the underwear lying all over the place, which let's face it, some of us live like that. Also, do you really want them to know where you live? As a lawyer, I work with people who sometimes are not the most savory of people, and I'm not so sure I want them knowing where I live. Necessarily. So these are all things you have to think about, but you solve a lot of these problems by simply making the decision that you will not see clients in the home. Okay. The key to home office success, I used the word before, but I really want to underscore it. You got to be invisible. You got to be, people shouldn't even know that you work out of the house. I've been working out of my house now for almost 20 years. Most of my neighbors don't know. Until they listen to this, until they watch this video, they will not know that I have been working out of my house for the last 20 years. Why? I'm quiet. I never see clients in the house. I'm on my PC most of the time. Every once in a while, I take a phone call. I don't work, I work late at night, but only on the computer. I'm not making a lot of noise. I don't have, stereo boom boxes going all hours of the day or night. There are no noxious odors coming from my house. The kids in the street don't have to dodge all the cars in front of the house to play stickball or basketball or whatever they play. I'm not changing the character of my neighborhood. My neighbors don't even know. And the other 7 neighbors of my neighbors that are working out of their homes, I don't know that they are either. That's the beauty of this. Invisibility is the key to success in a home office. And here are some tips for you. How do you achieve invisibility? Well, first of all, don't use your home address for business purposes. Get a P.O. box if your business can handle that. Get a UPS. I love the UPS stores, just so you know. I think every home-based business should have a UPS store private mailbox. Now, a lot of you know the UPS stores, that's where you go to ship things by UPS, but they also provide what they call private mailbox service. You can rent a mailbox at your UPS store, just like you could rent a post office box from your local post office. The difference is that when you rent a post office box from the post office, it has to be P.O. Box 123. When you rent the box from a UPS store, though, it's an actual street address. It becomes 123 Main Street, suite number 456. And that's a big difference. A lot of people who deal with you will not know that you have a private mailbox. I'm a big believer in the UPS stores. That is one of the key things. Also, too, the UPS store is located in a commercial zone, so you don't have to worry about their zoning, right? You'll be doing business there, and also, too, we'll talk about this a little bit more, but it gives you a place to go at least twice a day, because when you work out of the house especially, it can get a little lonely sometimes, and we'll talk about that. At least when you have a UPS store private mailbox, you get to go to the UPS store twice a day, in the morning when you drop your stuff off, and then in the afternoon when you pick up the incoming mail. It'll get you out of the house and get you some fresh air every once in a while, okay? Use this address when registering your trade name or DBA. When you have a business of your own and you're using a DBA or a trade name, you usually are required to register that name with the local authorities. In most states, it's the county clerk's office. Here in Connecticut, it's the town clerk's office or the city clerk's office. But you have to register that name somewhere. When you register your DBA with the local authorities, make sure you use your private mailbox address. Do not use your home address. Your home address should not appear anywhere on your business cards, your stationery, your website, anywhere. All that should appear there is your private mailbox address or your P.O. box if you are using a P.O. box mail address. Rent conference room space from local professional firms. Believe it or not, a lot of professional firms in the area are looking for business, and they will actually let you use their conference rooms. Whenever I have a big closing with more than 2 people involved, there are 3 law firms here in town that will actually let me use their conference rooms as long as I book them far enough in advance. That's a big help to me. It makes me look a little bit more professional, but also, too, it means that it's not happening at the house. It's very hard to have a closing of a business transaction in a diner. Trust me, I have found this out the hard way. Whenever you see people at a diner and they're passing documents, it's not the professional appearance that a lawyer especially wants to have. There's only so much. Don't get me wrong, diners are wonderful. We'll talk about diners in a minute, but they're not a great place to close business deals. You need a conference room or something like that. Rent them, talk to some local professional firms, and basically cut a deal with them. Say, look, I'll send you some of my overspill business if you let me have access to your conference room every once in a while. 3 or 4 times a year, I might need it for a closing or something, or an important meeting. See clients in their offices wherever possible or in a neutral location. For the first 10 years that I was working out of the house, I was actually known as the diner lawyer of Fairfield County. That was my nickname. You've heard the Lincoln lawyer, right? Well, I was the diner lawyer because I knew every diner in Fairfield and New Haven counties. I knew the owners on a personal level. That is where I met. If my clients did not have an office where we could meet, this is where I met my clients. Why diners? Well, there's 2 reasons for that. Number one, if you've ever been to a diner, they got everything. They serve any kind of food in the world. You will always find something on a diner menu that you like, always, because they do everything. And if you don't see anything on the menu that you like, you ask them, they'll make it for you anyway, because they got the ingredients. And I don't know how they do this, but they got the ingredients for every dish known to mankind. It's all in the back. I do not know how diners do this. But the second reason about diners, they usually don't rush you. As long as you don't go there at a peak hour of the day, you can sit and schmooze with your client for 3 hours and they don't really care. Just make sure when the waitress, or the waiter, is at the end of his shift, you give him his tip. But except for that, they will not hassle you. If you try to have a meeting at a more upscale restaurant, they want to turn the table over quickly. They do not do that at diners. As long as you're not hitting them during peak hours. I would not schedule a meeting, for example, for Saturday, right after all the kids are finished with their sports events and stuff and everybody's at the diner having breakfast and stuff like that. Do not schedule meetings for that time. But as long as you're not doing that, the diner people are pretty good. They will not hassle you. I'm a big supporter of diners. Avoid noise, especially at night. lots of cars in your driveway or street, or noxious odors that will give you away. Exterior signage is an absolute no-no. When you do a home office, you should not have any signage on the outside that's of your house that says you have a business there at all. That's one of the surest ways to tip off your neighbors that something weird is going on in your place. Okay? Believe it or not, one of the very earliest cases on home offices, I kid you not, I actually read this case when I was in law school back in the 1970s. It involved a guy in Indiana who was operating a rendering plant out of his basement. Do you know what a rendering plant is? That's where you take animal carcasses and strip the meat off them for things like ribs and other, exactly. Just the looks on your faces tells it all. He was doing this business out of his home. He had a truck, a panel truck. He would go to local butcher shops, get their leftovers, bring them to the house, and he was like boiling fat off of these bones in his basement. And the amazing thing was he did it for about 8 or 9 years before his neighbors turned him in. I can't imagine what those people went through living next to an operation. I mean, were there no smells? How do you get away with that for 8 or 9 years before his neighbors caught on to him? I really don't know that. See, it's amazing to me. To me, it's a lesson in human nature. Even though people suspect that something weird is going on at your house, they tend to sort of shovel it under the carpet for a long time before they really get angry enough that they start to do something about it. Inertia is one of the great forces in human nature. I actually had a chance to visit the house, or the neighborhood. I shouldn't say that. I didn't go into the house. But I was in Indiana on a business tour about 10 years ago, and I was in the same neighborhood with this. So just for fun, I drove my rental car into this neighborhood. I figured, well, maybe this guy had like a big farmhouse. It was on a big tract, a 5-acre piece of land. No, it was a residential cul-de-sac. And this guy was operating a rendering plant with neighbors like within 10 feet of him. I just don't know how he got away with that for 8 or 9 years. It says a lot about who we are as people. Okay, home-based businesses aren't for sissies, okay? Okay, it takes a certain amount of discipline to run a home office, okay? Here are the 7 enemies of the home-based business owner, whatever you are, whichever one of the cars. Loneliness, by far and away the biggest problem of the home-based entrepreneur. If you have a spouse who works during the day, things are going to be very quiet during the day. If you are single, you may go several days in a row without seeing carbon-based life forms. This is one of the big reasons why I believe in the UPS stores, because if nothing else, they get you out of the house twice a day. You got to go to the mailbox twice a day to pick up your mail. That will at least get you out of the house a little bit. But loneliness is a big enemy. I write books. When I'm on deadline, I sometimes go for like a week or 2 without seeing another human being. That can get real lonely after a while. And when you're alone for that long, you start thinking crazy things. Okay, so seriously, lonely. You have to find a way to combat loneliness. Your spouse or family members, if they are around. One of the rules of running a home office is you got to manage your family members' expectations. When you are working out of the house, you are not always present. Even though you are physically there, your body is there, your mind is focused on your work and getting your job done, and they have to respect that, and also you have to respect their separate existence. So when the kids come home from school, you got to tell them, don't bang the door and start yelling and screaming, because I may be on a conference call with an important client. I don't want them hearing yelling and screaming in the background. If you have an infant, that infant should be in a separate room where their crying will not be overheard by your clients or customers on the phone. Forgive me, that may sound a little harsh at first, but I strongly believe in that. You must put a firm barrier between your work life and your home life, because the physical barrier that used to exist doesn't exist anymore. See, when I first started working, I was in New York. I had a 2-hour commute into New York City every day. That created a barrier between my work life and my private life. By the time I got home from my 2-hour commute, work was 1,000,000 miles away. When you're working out of the spare bedroom in your bunny slippers, that does not happen. There's no physical barrier between your work life and your private life. And that creates problems in a number of ways, but specifically with family members. They're going to want to get underfoot. Hey, honey, I'm going to the groceries. You want something? You're in the middle of a conference call. You're working on an important document or something like that. That has to be discouraged. You have to let people know. When I'm in the office, one of my favorite people who works out of her home, my accountant, works out of her home. I won't mention her name, but she's a lovely human being. But she has 5 kids. And she works out of a home office. During tax time, that can be very stressful for her. But she has a rule. Whenever she hears the kids making noise in the background, she kicks the door open and screams at the top of her lungs, "Is there blood?" And if the answer is no, she goes on working. If the answer is yes, she stops and she deals with the situation. That is her 3-word phrase. Is there blood? If there's no blood, it's not important. We'll deal with it later. Keep on working, get the returns done. I love to tell that story because she's a real human being about this. She's been practicing out of her house 20 years or so, as I have as well. Temptations, the biggest one, the refrigerator. Oh, let me tell you, folks, this is a biggie. It shouldn't surprise you to know, if you go on my YouTube channel, by the way, and look at my YouTube channel for Cliff Enico, I got some old TV shows up from that I did like back in the 90s and stuff like that. And when you take a look at those videos and you look at me now, the first thought that occurs to you, man, this dude has gained a lot of weight in those 20 years. I will tell you something. The first year that I worked out of my home office, I gained 25 pounds. I will share that with you. I had always worked in office buildings that were kind of remote from civilization. You know, if you wanted to get lunch, you had to take the elevator, go down to the lobby, walk half a mile to the place, wait online, get your sandwich, go back to the building, go back up the elevator. Now, working out of the house, I got the world's greatest cafeteria, and it's only steps away from my workstation. Trust me, weight management and weight control becomes an issue. My advice to you would be, if you're going to have a gourmet refrigerator in the house, have a gym set up right next to the refrigerator. Seriously, don't put it in the basement. Don't put it in the family room. Put it right next to that refrigerator, so every time you see the refrigerator, you see the treadmill. This is important, seriously, or else this is what will happen. My video team is using wide-angle lenses. You should not have to do that, okay, when you have a home office, okay? Household chores, the honey-dos. When I started working out of the house, we had a little system, my wife and I. I put a little, a clipboard up, near the refrigerator. She could put whatever chores she wanted to, and every day I would do 2 of them. And she would pick the 2. So the list would have like 26 things on it, but every day she would put down, these are the 2 I want you to do today. And I told her, you get 2 a day. That's what you get. No more than that. Unless it's an emergency, 2 a day is all you get. You can pick them, but no more than 2 a day. I don't want a situation where I have to go to the bank, then the dry cleaner, then the post office to mail out the packages, then my UPS store, and I meet somebody there and I talk. And before you know it, I spend 3 to 4 hours on the local commercial strip when I should be at my desk working. Honeydews can be a terrible distraction. Contractors, okay? When I announced that I was going to work out of my house, my wife jumped for joy. And the reason she jumped for joy was because before I started working out of the house, I was working in New York City. She was working in a city that was maybe about a half an hour's drive away. And the only time we ever fought, we have a very good marriage, my wife and I, but the only time we ever fought is when something happened around the house and we had to call in a contractor. Because the big fight was all about who was going to stay home and babysit the contractor while they're working on our toilets or our attic or whatever it was they were working on, right? So my wife, when I announced that I was going to work out of a home office, she jumped for joy because she realized now we're not going to fight about that anymore. We know who's going to be home to deal with the contractors, when they're working. But I'll tell you, it's an issue because when you're working out of your house, especially I work at a very cerebral job. When I'm working on a 50-page contract, I cannot be disturbed. I mean, I'm taking things, I'm moving them around, I'm eliminating duplicate things. I mean, drafting legal documents is a very tedious, very cerebral task. It takes up every inch of your brain space. It does. I can't do that with people going bang, bang, bang. Hey, Joe, hey, Jose, what are you doing, man? Oh, okay, you do that, you can't do that. Okay, boy, I can't work like that, okay? And there are times when I said, shut that up. I've had to do that with these people. Contractors can be a pain in the ass. Also, too, when they're too quiet, that's when I really worry. That's when I know the bottles of wine in the basement are going to start disappearing. I know that. I don't trust my contractors. I don't. First thing I do when a contractor's over to the house, I go down, I count the bottles of wine in the basement. Remember James Bond used to do this? He would, whenever he was in a hotel room, he would take a piece of hair and he would lick it and put it over the door so that if he woke up and that piece of hair was missing, he knew someone had come in. Remember that? I do stuff like that. I do stuff like that in my home office now. Make sure, you said you didn't go down to the basement. That tripwire is not there anymore. I got you. Let's see what's missing. You got to do stuff like that because if you're so involved, they'll walk away with the damn house. You got to worry about that. Okay, habit, ritual, routine. I used to call this the iron triangle. Iron triangle. For several years after I first started working out of my house, things got a little boring for a while. I wasn't doing a lot of traveling when I first started doing it, and I found that my routine was getting a little dull. I would begin my day with the home office, and then at lunchtime, I would go to the gym, work out for an hour. Yes, I did work out for a while, and then I gave up because it was too much hassle. Then I would go to the UPS store and do all my mailing, and then I go back to the home office. I used to call that the iron triangle: house, gym, UPS store, house. House, gym, UPS, house. Every once in a while, to break the monotony, I would go house, UPS store, gym, house. Okay, I do it backwards just for the sake. I wore a groove in Black Rock Turnpike. If you look very carefully, as you drive down the local commercial strip, you'll see a groove. That is the groove that I wore, going house, gym, UPS store, house. That is, you get like that, and you got to do something to break that. Routine, otherwise, it becomes really monotonous. You got to watch out for that. Letting yourself go. Okay, we talked about weight, but it's a lot more than that. Okay, especially if you're a guy. Okay, women I think have an easier time with this. Okay, but if you have a Y chromosome, okay, one of the most exhilarating moments that you have when you work out of a home office is when you realize, I don't have to shave every day. I don't have to necessarily comb my hair or put gook in it. I don't have to put glop in my hair every day, and no one's going to see me. I'm not seeing clients today, so maybe I'll go without shaving. I kind of nicked myself yesterday. This'll and then but the trouble though is when you start going down that road, okay, you don't know when to stop. You begin with little things like not shaving, and then eventually you get to the point where you haven't taken a bath in a week. Okay, you got to watch out for stuff like this, especially guys. I mean, men, you kind of know what I'm talking about here. I mean, you're going to start looking like Grizzly Adams after a while if you're not careful with this. And don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm not saying that you should. I mean, the first month that I worked out of my house, I actually wore a jacket and tie, believe it or not, because I didn't know what working was about unless I had a jacket and tie on. Now that's kind of silly, But you got to watch out for yourself. Don't let yourself go. Don't worry a little bit about your personal hygiene. I'll tell you one of my little secrets is the minute I get up out of bed in the morning, the very first thing I do, I make my bed. That's the first thing I do. I make my bed. Why? Because it gives me something, it's a discipline. I don't have to do it right then, of course not. But by doing it when I first get up, I've accomplished something with my day already a minute or two after I wake up in the morning. And that's a very good thing, a little discipline, because that gets you into the mode of, I've got to do things here around the house. I will never let dishes pile up in the sink. I will never let an unmade bed go unmade for several days in a row. You got to watch out for stuff like that, especially if you're a guy. Bad habits can form this way if you're not careful. Consider setting office hours. Okay, your clients and customers, okay? Don't get me wrong. Your clients and customers are important. Without them, you don't have a business. But once they know you work out of your home, be very careful who you tell that to. Your information. Obviously, you don't want your neighbors knowing. We talked about that. But I wouldn't let my clients and customers, unless a client knows me for a very long time, I usually don't volunteer that I work out of the house. Why? Because when they know you work out of your home, they expect that you will be available 24/7, 365. They assume, well, he works out of his house. I can call him at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night. He'll be there. And if he doesn't pick up, he's ignoring me. Now, you don't think about that, right? You would never think of calling somebody who works out of a real office. You wouldn't call him Saturday night, would you? And expect him to be at his office? Well, except for maybe an accountant at tax time or something like that. But you wouldn't expect that, would you? Right? But when they know you work out of your house, that starts happening. Cliff, I sent you an email, 11 o'clock Saturday. Yeah, I know. I went somewhere on Sunday. Dude, you didn't get back to me. Well, dude, it's only Monday morning, man. I'm looking at it now. Let's talk about it now. No, I wanted to hear from you. This is what starts to happen. It becomes a creeping thing. It becomes a 24/7 creeping thing. They expect a real-time response. Consider setting office hours or otherwise limiting your accessibility. This is what I did when I first got started. Hi, I'm Cliff Enico, law offices of Clifford R. Enico. Our office hours are 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday. Just put that on your voicemail and put it on your email signature line. That's it. That's all you have to do. I mean, yes, I work out of my house. That doesn't mean I'm available 24/7. This is when I expect you to call me. I've since changed that because I've learned that when you do that, what happens is you get half your calls for the entire week between 3 and 4 on Friday afternoon. That's what happens. They all put it at the very end of the week. Next thing you know, you got 50 phone calls you got to deal with and 100 emails. Because everybody's clearing off their desk for the weekend. So you got to be a little bit more flexible than that. Lack of physical time barriers between work and private life. When I first went off on my own, my accountant put it well. My first thought was, this is going to save me so much time because I'm not going to be commuting anymore. I'm not going to be wasting any time in the car, on the train. And her response to me was, Cliff, no, you don't get it. When you're going to work harder than you've ever worked before because there's no barriers now between your work and your personal life. The office is always there. The office is always beckoning, like a siren. You're constantly walking past it. And whenever you walk past it, you think, wait a minute, there's that one email. I have a few minutes now. Let me see if I can return it. Next thing you know, there's 3 other emails, and there's a phone call maybe you want to return. The next thing you know, you're starting to become a workaholic. This can happen, when there's no barriers between your work and your private life. Workaholism is a real risk. Poor time management is a real problem. Because you can always say that it's very tempting to say, well, you know what, I'll get to that contract this afternoon. First, I want to get to the UPS store, and maybe I'll go to the grocery store, I'll do a couple of errands, and before you know it, it's 7 o'clock at night, you haven't done the contract that you promised the client you'd have done for that day. So workaholism and time management are a challenge. You have to be a little disciplined when you're running a home office. Okay, let's talk about resources. What are some of the things you need to work from home? Privacy. Your home office should ideally be a dedicated workspace, preferably a separate room. You should have a room of your own that is just your office and nothing else. That'll become important when we talk about the home office deduction, by the way. That's one of the things the IRS looks for. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Preferably a separate room, not part of a room used for other things. I know a lot of eBay people who like to work out of their kitchens or their basements and stuff like that because that's where they have their inventory. You got to be careful. Make sure that when you are using part of a room as your home office, that you somehow separate that from the rest of the room. So use dividers. If you've ever had a little kid, for example, you have those portable things that you used to put to make sure they didn't walk through the doors and stuff like that. Keep that around. Don't throw that away when your kid outgrows his toddler years. Keep that around. Use that as a barrier so you can always tell where your home office is. I know people who use duct tape. Quite frankly, they mark the space off on the floor with duct tape. Well, if you have a linoleum floor, be very careful. You will never get that crap off. It'll never happen. But I know people who do that. They say, this is the home office. That side of the duct tape is the home office. That's the private living area. Technology. Remember I said one of the main reasons we can work out of our homes today is because our technology allows us to do that. But it won't unless you use that technology. You definitely need at least one desktop computer or laptop, smartphone, lots and lots of backup. When you worked for a big company, there were people who used to worry about things like backup. When you work out of a home office, that becomes your worry. And backing up, you cannot back up enough the stuff that you do. Your physical what's the biggest mistake that people make when they back things up? Do you back up your Word files and stuff and your Excel spreadsheets and all that, right? What do you back it onto? A CD, right? Or a DVD if it's video, right? But then what do you do with the CD after it's all done? You put it right next to your computer, right? So that way if the house burns down, you not only lose the data on your computer and your hard drive, but you also lose the backup disk. Your backup disk should always be in a remote location. I use a safe deposit box. I actually have 2 safe deposit boxes at a local bank because I've been doing this for so long. I've got literally hundreds and hundreds of backup CDs that I use for my stuff. So make sure your backups are all at an off-site location. Preferably, you should have 2 locations. One of the beautiful things about Office 365, anybody here use Office 365? Seriously, consider upgrading to Office 365 because what it does is whenever you create a document, it saves it in 2 places. It saves it in a My Documents folder, but it also saves it in the cloud. Office 365 is Microsoft's cloud-based application, and it's marvelous because what they do is what's called redundancy. When that document is saved in the cloud, it's saved on at least 2 different servers in different parts of the United States. So whenever you create a document with Office 365 using their version of Word, you not only have your hard copy on the hard disk, but you also got 2 other locations in the cloud. Back it up to a CD, you now have it in 4 different locations. The odds that you will lose that document become almost 0 when you use that service. Seriously, it's a little bit more expensive than the regular Office, but take a good look at it. I mean, Microsoft, they're as safe as anybody is. There's no such thing as 100% security on the internet. We all know that. But but if they're hacking into Microsoft, we got a lot more serious problems than you losing a document. Okay, space for files, library. I still have a lot of paper, dead trees records. Unfortunately, being a lawyer, I cannot throw anything away. When they redid our basement, they had this little area left over which they were going to wall off, and I said, no, 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 I'm paying you. I will put a wall, put a door in there. And they said, oh, you want a wine cellar? No, I want a storage room for my files. Okay, because that can be added to your home office deduction, by the way. We'll talk about that. If you have a separate dedicated area for files or a library or books or something like that that you use in your work, you can actually add that to your home office as part of the home office deduction. Professional telephone coverage. This is very important, okay? If my ISP, the guy that handles my web stuff, he's a great guy. I've known him for 20 years. He's a personal friend. He lives in the suburbs of Los Angeles, you know, and I love this guy. He's a home-based entrepreneur. He's actually has about 3,000 people whose websites he hosts. My only problem with him, whenever I have a problem and I call tech support, I always hear a baby crying in the background, always, when I pick it. I mean, the guy works out of his house. I get that, but here's what I don't get. I've been working with this guy for 20 years, and every time I call tech support, I hear a baby crying in the background. Is this the same baby? How many kids does this guy have? I'm kind of wondering about this guy. Is he running a daycare center or something out of his house too? Because every time I go, it's been 20 years. It's like 20 years, Jack. You know, it's not his real name. You know, are you still having babies, man? Or what's the story here? You're like 58 years old. You know, what's the story with this? You know, I just don't get it. It's always a baby in the background. But I mean, I don't mind because I know him. I know he's good. He's always very responsive. But it just is not a professional image. Having said that, though, don't overdo it. I work with a financial consultant. I won't mention locations or names or anything like that. I love her to death. She's very good. She does a lot of work with some of my clients who are facing bankruptcy issues. She's almost like a debt counselor. She helps them work through those kinds of issues. My problem with her is exactly the opposite. She's a one-person show. She works out of her home. But when you call her phone, hi, you have reached the offices of Jane Doe and Associates. For service, press 1. For marketing, press 2. To hire us, press 3. And she's got like 7 things. Damn it, it's only her. There's only one person there. And when what's worse, you can't just hit the operator. And at the very end of the whole thing, though, she says, if you have for our general mailbox, press 0. You press 0 and she picks up the phone. Hi, it's Jane. What's wrong with that picture? It's too complicated. It's just her. Okay, I understand she's got big plans. She wants to add people, whatever. If you got like 5 or 6 people, if you're doing a virtual company, for example, that's a great way to set up your phone service. But if it's just you, you shouldn't have more than one mailbox. I'm sorry. You know, why should I have to figure out which one? It's like the lady in the, it's like that, what's that old TV show with Money Hall? The one is it curtain number 1, door number 2, door number 3. Which one is he hiding behind? I don't know. I don't have to figure that out to get a hold of you. You know, if it's just you, you should have one mailbox. Don't make your, by trying to appear bigger than you are, you sometimes can have a problem sometimes. That's a good example of that. Okay, marketing materials. One of the paper handouts, by the way, I have a bunch of handouts for those of you who came in a little bit late. You can grab it on your way out. But I gave you a very nice little checklist of some marketing things that you can do for a solo consulting or service business that are very helpful. Just keep in mind that your website and your LinkedIn profile are of paramount importance here. That's the image that you're presenting to the world. Don't scrimp on those things. Don't do a template website that looks like everybody else's website. Spend some money, get it designed properly. When you work out of your home, you got to really work to convey a professional brand image, and your web image becomes a lot more important when you work out of your house. Maybe a virtual assistant. I'm wrestling with this right now. I'm thinking seriously of hiring a virtual assistant. That's somebody who works at a remote location, who handles my phone coverage and a lot of my admin. I'm of 2 minds about it. For a lot of people, I think it makes sense. But there are 2 things that concern me. A lot of these people are part-timers. These are usually women, I hate to say it, but women who have small children living at home, and they're doing this because they can do it in their spare time, you know, when they're working around the house. Make sure they are in it for the long haul. And that's not a problem, but make sure that they're in it for the long haul. I don't want to have to replace this person 3 times a year. I want some stability here. I mean, I'm going to ask, when I interview a virtual assistant, my first question is, you know, health permitting, are you going to be around for the next 5 years? Are you planning to still be in this business? I want continuity. I want people to get to know you. I want them to know that you're the voice of the law offices of Clifford R. Co. And if I'm not comfortable with that, I don't hire them. And so far, I haven't found anybody, which is a big issue for me. And also, make sure that they run their home offices as professionally as you do yours. If every time they call, there's a baby crying in the background, that doesn't affect their professional image. It affects yours. Okay, protecting your home office. Okay. This is about insurance. There are 3 kinds of insurance that you should have for your home. Commercial liability. If you are seeing clients in the home, you need what we call commercial liability coverage. This is slip and fall insurance. You know, this is what happens when somebody, comes into your house, they slip and fall on the ice. Okay, you are as a homeowner liable for that. And there are some homeowners policies that will not cover that under a home office under their umbrella liability policy. Be careful about that. If you have an umbrella policy, ask your insurance agent or broker if that covers your home office as well, because some policies do not. But if you're not seeing clients in the home, you can probably go a little light on the commercial liability, but you do need property casualty insurance. A lot of people don't know this. Your homeowner's policy does not cover a home office. If a tree falls and knocks in your roof, your homeowner's policy will pay for the new roof, but all of your lost data, your business records, and all of that will not be covered. The good news is that most homeowners' policies have what they call a home office rider. It's an additional $10, $20 a year in premiums. I always tell people that that's probably the cheapest home office coverage you can get. If you already have a homeowner's policy, and of course you do, if you have a mortgage, you have a homeowner's policy because the banks insist on that. Spend the extra $10, $20, get a home office rider to cover your business data, your computer, any of your business assets that you use in the home. Errors and omissions, that's malpractice insurance. If you make a mistake, if you foul up. And the reason for that is something I can tell you as a lawyer. Believe it or not, lawyers hate having to put liens on real estate. You know, it's one of those things we all worry about as home-based entrepreneurs. You know, I'm going to make a mistake, I'm going to get sued, they're going to put a lien in the house. But believe it or not, it very rarely happens. And the reason it very rarely happens is because plaintiffs' attorneys would much rather go after a bank account or an insurance policy. Trying to get a lien on real property is very difficult in most states. They'd much rather have an insurance policy. So if you have an errors and omissions policy, you can rest assured that if you ever do get sued, they're going to go after the insurance policy and fight with your insurance company. They're not going to try to put a lien in your house, a week before you try to sell your house, that kind of thing. Consider maybe, and I'm not saying you should do this, consider putting your house in your spouse's name, but there are some rules here, okay? It's not for everybody. If you decide to do this, always remember, number one, you are making a legal transfer. This is a legal transaction that you are doing. You are putting your house into your spouse's name, and the courts will enforce that. So if you ever get divorced at some point, you are not only going to be without a spouse, you are going to be homeless. You're going to be, sitting on an exit of I-95 with a sign saying, we'll do whatever for food. Okay, and I don't want to see any of my clients in a position like that. If you are at all doubtful about the strength of your marriage, do not do this. Do not put title to assets in your spouse's name. And even if you are secure in your marriage, think twice about it anyway, because you never know. I could tell you stories about people who come home from work in the middle of the day and they find things that they didn't know was going on. Just let's not be specific about it, but things can happen like that. Always remember and be careful. And the other thing you have to be careful about here, if you are putting, if let's say you're not married, okay, if you're going to put title to your house in somebody else's name other than your spouse, this is very important. Make sure that that person changes their will so that the asset comes back to you if they die. A lot of people forget to do this. I had the situation, one of my very first clients actually was a gentleman. He was a single man. He lived alone, and he had a beautiful house in Westport off of Campo Beach that was worth about $1.5 million, and he owned it outright. The mortgage was paid off. It was his house. He owned it outright. He decided to buy a franchise, and he was worried about getting sued and getting the house attached. So what did he do? Now, he wasn't married. He was a single man, but he had a mother who absolutely adored him. So what he did, and Mom knew about it, he put the house into her name. They did a transfer. They deeded the house into her name. Everything 100% legal, 100% buttoned up. Mom loved it. She knew exactly what he was doing. She wanted to help him, right? So there's only one problem. Mom was 88 years old. What happened a couple of years later? She died, and the house did not go back to him. The house went to him and his 5 brothers and sisters as joint tenants. So he went from owning 100% of the house to only owning 1/6 of the house, and the brothers and sisters did not get along. They hated each other. That was when he called me and asked me to be his attorney. Okay, I always get the calls after the you-know-what has hit the fan. And we finally got the house back into his name again, but it took 4 years and over $2 million of his money to do it. Very simple. Whenever you're transferring title to a house or other property into the name of someone who is not your spouse, get them to change their will to put in a specific bequest clause. That's a very simple thing. An attorney will only charge you maybe a half an hour of his time to do it. It's a simple clause that says, in the event of my untimely death, this asset goes back to Cliff. That's called a specific bequest. The house located at whatever, 123 Main Street goes back to Cliff. That's all you have. With that, if he had had that clause in his mother's will, the house would have gone back to him. It wouldn't have gone as part of the general estate to him and his brothers and sisters in equal portions. Be very, very careful about that. Okay, now let's talk about zoning, about the zoning cops. Okay, if you are truly invisible, you won't have any problems. That's my message. If you are truly invisible, there's no way that even your neighbors, your next door neighbor knows that you're working out of your house. You will not have a problem with the zoning cops. Even if they find out about it, you're probably not going to have a problem because nobody cares. You know, the kids can play basketball on the street, they don't have to dodge cars. You don't have 8 million cars in your parking lot every day. You haven't changed the character of the neighborhood, so no one will care and you will not have a problem. When you're registering a DBA or trade name, be careful about using a residential address. Because what you're doing there is you're tipping your hand, okay? Most of us use a trade name, So for example, Clifford R. Ennico doing business as Cliff's Antiques. That's a DBA, that's a trade name. Under the law of Connecticut, I have to register that with my town clerk's office. And when I open my bank account, by the way, in order to take checks that are made out to Cliff's Antiques, I have to show the bank that DBA registration. They will not open the account. They will open the account for Clifford R. Ennico, because that's my name. I can show them my driver's license, but they will not open the account for Cliff's Antiques unless I show them that DBA registration. If that DBA registration has a home address, the town clerk's office will send you down the corridor to the zoning office to have a chat. That's what's going to happen. Make sure you use your UPS private mailbox address. Whenever you do a DBA or other registration, use that business PO box. Do not use your, because then you're tipping to the off to the government authorities the fact that you have a home office that may be illegal. All right, that's why you do that. For larger businesses, some towns offer a home occupation permit. Some of you may want to, by the way, some of you want to take a picture of this, by the way. This is one slide I would, if you're going to take pictures of any of my slides, this is one I would suggest. The Wilton Chamber of Commerce has, Wilton, Connecticut has a home occupation permit that you can get. And it's actually very easy. You just go to Town Hall in Wilton. I did look at the other towns in Fairfield County, and very few towns have this. Wilton was the only one that I could find that has one. But that's where you can learn what their rules are. Bridgeport actually has done something very interesting. I like Bridgeport zoning regulations for home office. It's very rare that you'll hear an attorney say that. But I like what the city of Bridgeport, Connecticut has done with home offices. What they have done is they've recognized that there are different kinds of home offices. They actually have two permits. They have an administrative review permit for a home office. That's just somebody who's working out of their house, who's not necessarily running a business there, but who's just working out of their home, say as a telecommuter, for the convenience of their employer. They must do business via mail or electronic medium only. They cannot do business any other way. You can't see people in the house. You can't use a truck. You can't do anything like that. If you think about it, that makes sense, right? The second type of permit is the special use permit for a home business. And there are all kinds of restrictions on hours, numbers of visitors, numbers of employees. I like what Bridgeport has done so much that I basically made it a separate slide. Take a picture of this one. This is one I would suggest you take a picture of. This is from the city of Bridgeport, Connecticut. This is their rules for a special use permit for a home-based business, somebody who's actually conducting an entrepreneurial business out of their home. And I like the rules because even if you don't live in the city of Bridgeport, Connecticut, which most people listening to this video are not, they're good, excellent best practices. If you follow these best practices, you should never have a problem with your local zoning authority. It shouldn't happen. I'll go down the list very quickly. You must not change the residential appearance of your premises or the residential character of your neighborhood. No external signage of any kind. No neon lights, no strobe lights, nothing like that, but no exterior signage of any kind. Customers only visit the premises from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. No more than 8 customers or clients may visit each day. No more than 2 employees other than resident family members. Okay, you don't want the parking lot covered with cars. Home office may not occupy more than 50% of the gross floor space. If your whole home is a business, I think you have other issues going on here other than a home office issue. Retail sale of goods must be entirely ancillary to on-site services. In Bridgeport, there are some people who have like beauty salons out of their home, and they can sell like hair supplies and things like that as part of that, but they can't have a separate business selling hair supplies, unless of course they're selling on eBay or something like that, where nobody cares. All parking must be on-site, no street parking. Has to be on-site. No exterior storage of goods, supplies, or materials. That can be an issue, actually. Back in the early 90s, I had a desktop publishing business, and I actually used my basement as my warehouse storage space. And every once in a while, as much as I begged them not to, the publishers would send me the books to my home address. So they would drop this pallet of 1,000 books in my driveway where it would stay all day. My neighbors had a problem with that, as you can well tell. Also, too, by the way, taking 50 heavy boxes of books, each one weighing about 30, 40 pounds, and bringing them one by one from your driveway down to your basement is a task that none of you should ever have to do at any time in your life. So be careful about that. If you're, like, I actually have a client who's a self-published author who tells me he always wants to make sure the deliveries happen while he's home. Because otherwise those books are going to be sitting in his driveway for a day or two if he's traveling, and the neighbors will complain if they see that. They'll also steal a lot of your books too. You can tell, I don't have a very good view of neighbors in general. Really, neighbors are 90% of your problem when you have a home-based business. No hazardous materials other than the kind you normally have around your house. So for example, if you have a grill, you can have a propane tank. I mean, no one's going to care about that. No more than one home business on the premises. That should be common sense, but the minute you're thinking about going public, it's time to get out of the house. I think at that point I would start thinking about renting some commercial space if you're going to be a publicly owned company. Okay, let's talk about the home office deduction. Should you take it? Absolutely. There was a time when the home office deduction was an audit trigger. That is not the case anymore. In the early 2000s, the IRS came past some very detailed rules and regulations for home offices. So we know what those rules are now. We don't have to worry about the IRS coming down. You definitely should. The form that you file is Form 8829. If you go to irs.gov and go to Forms and Publications, you'll download the form. The instructions to the form are actually very good. They're very clear. This is one of the better IRS forms. Read the instructions to Form 8829, and you'll know as much as lawyers and accountants know about the home office deduction. The IRS did a very good job with that form, unlike some of the other things that they've done. Here are the tips. Okay, first of all, the first thing you have to do, measure your home office accurately. I tell people, have a contractor do it for you. Have a contractor. Don't do it yourself, because when you do it yourself, what do? You take the yardstick and you kind of go end over end over end. You end up with a very imprecise measurement, and you always end up cheating yourself. You always end up with a home office that's too small. Have a contractor. They have very specialized measuring tools, and the beautiful part is they'll give you a letter. They'll say, I have measured the upstairs right-hand spare bedroom at 123 Main Street, and it is exactly 123.456 square feet. That is, when the IRS guy shows up, the first thing he does to audit a home office, the first thing he does, he pulls out a tape measure. Being able to hand him that letter saying, save yourself, Mr. Agent. I had the space professionally measured. This is the exact square footage. They will accept that, okay? Secondly, keep personal stuff out of your office. A home office must, in order to qualify for the home office deduction, the home office has to be used exclusively for business purposes. My test for this is very simple. If you wouldn't have it in a corporate office or cubicle, do not have it in your home office. It's that simple. If you're thinking about having something in your home office and you wouldn't put it in a real office, take it out. So a picture of your wife and kids, or your spouse and kids, absolutely, right? Because you'd have that in an office, wouldn't you? A little boom box so you can listen to music after hours, yeah, you would have that in a home office. A doggy bed? No. You wouldn't have a doggy bed in a real office, unless, of course, it is a companion animal. We used to call a seeing eye dog. That's always permitted, okay? You can have the doggy bed there. A crib? No. Okay, the kid's got to be elsewhere. He can be right outside the door, but he cannot be in the office himself, okay? No inappropriate. The first thing the IRS audit looks at is mixed-use space. They want to be able to prove that you're not using the space exclusively, because then what they do is they disallow the whole deduction. So it's a very simple thing to be clear. Just make sure, just ask yourself the question, would this be in a real office? If the answer is no, take it out of your home office. Don't leave it there. It's okay to add storage, warehouse, file, and library space. So for example, I use my basement as file storage. That portion of the basement that I use for my files, I can add to my home office to make it bigger, but I can't take the whole basement, okay? So How do you solve that problem? Duct tape. Very simple. It's your basement. Nobody cares what it looks like, right? Take some duct tape, measure out the space that you're using for your files, your inventory, whatever it is you got in your basement, and then put the duct tape down and measure off, and then have the contractor measure that space as part of their measurement. And that's fine. You're okay. Because what happens is the IRS audits you, they go down the basement, they see a pool table, they automatically write off your basement space. Whereas if you can say, well, wait a minute, hold it, that's a duct, see that duct tape? It's just that area that I'm claiming. Measure that space. Now you've got them. Now you've got them at that point. You're not claiming the whole basement when you're only using a part of the basement. Everybody with me on that? It's a very simple point. Can you deduct your rented apartment? You can. You absolutely can, although keep in mind the city of Bridgeport does not allow you to use a home office out of a rental location. That's something where I'm not sure that that's constitutional, quite frankly. That's something I would like to see challenged, quite frankly, but you should be aware that some municipalities, their zoning codes will prohibit you from working out of a rented space, but the IRS does not care. You can. Can you deduct somebody else's home? That sounds funny, but you'd be surprised. In a lot of rural locations, you have people who sell on eBay, and they don't really have a big enough basement, but their neighbor has a barn. So what they do is the neighbors are nice. They let their neighbor use a part of their barn space to store their inventory. But you cannot take a home office deduction for space that is outside of the home. What you have to do there is you have to treat it as if it were a storage unit. But if you're in a situation like that where a neighbor is letting you use part of their property, what you do is you have your lawyer draw up a little one-page lease agreement and you pay rent to your neighbor for the use of the space because you can deduct the lease payments. It's just like leasing a storage unit. If you have like a Westie storage or something like that, you can deduct the rental for that space. It's the same if you're renting space from a neighbor, but you cannot take that space as part of your home office deduction. It has to be a deduction for rent. Can you deduct out-of-home expenses such as lawn care? Believe it or not, you cannot. There are two things you cannot deduct, okay? When you're taking the home office deduction, basically what you're doing is, the way the home office deduction works is it's a fraction. The numerator, the top number of the fraction, is the number of square footage of your home office. The denominator, the bottom number, is the total square footage of your home, measured from interior wall to interior wall. So if you have 100 square feet of home office space and 1,000 square feet in your home, 100 divided by 1,000 is 1/10 or 10%. You can take 10%, deduct 10% off your taxes on just about every household expense. That's why the home office deduction, for many home-based entrepreneurs, the home office deduction may be the biggest deduction that you take. Okay, that's why you're crazy not to take it. But there's some exceptions. There are some things you cannot deduct. You cannot deduct lawn care or landscaping because that takes place outside the home. If you have someone come in and clean your house, that's deductible. If you have all your utilities, all of that, you can definitely deduct 10% or whatever your percentage is of that. But you cannot deduct lawn or landscaping services. The other thing you can't deduct are what the IRS calls personal deductions. And these can get a little sloppy. So let's say, for example, you have someone come into your house every day to give you a personal massage. Now, if you're a Hollywood actor or actress, you might be able to claim that as a deduction because it relates to your home-based business. If you're a Hollywood actor or actress, your appearance is everything. So I can imagine that, name your favorite Hollywood actor or actress, can probably deduct the cost of a personal massage every day, because it relates to what they do for a living. But if you're a lawyer, a personal massage every day is not considered necessary to being a lawyer, although I could certainly use one every day. So that's something, so you will not be able to deduct those kinds of things. Ask your lawyer, ask your accountant for advice. And the other thing you want to keep in mind about home office deduction, if you take the home office deduction, you also have the option of depreciating your house for tax purposes, taking a depreciation deduction every year. I tell my clients not to do it. And I would advise you not to do it as well, because if you take the depreciation deduction and then you subsequently sell your house to somebody else, you have to recapture that depreciation deduction. You have to pay the IRS a lump sum to reimburse them for all the depreciation deductions that you took during the time that you own the house. That is not true of the other home office deductions, but it is true of depreciation. So, if you're looking at taking the home office deduction, by all means do it, but don't take the depreciation part, because that can create problems for you down the road, especially if you're thinking of selling the house in the next year or two, you might want to consider not doing that. And then just get Form 8829, read the instructions, and you'll know more about the home office deduction than you want to know. Okay, when do you need a real office? Okay, how do you know that your home office is getting too big? Well, you won't have too much of a time worrying about that, quite frankly. It's usually pretty obvious when a home office deduction has kind of reached its limits. When you have more than one employee working on site. The more people you have working on site, the harder it is to maintain that invisibility that you want to take. If you've got 10 employees, sooner or later, your neighbors are going to complain and moan about what it is you're doing. When you have to see more than a couple of clients a day, if people are sitting on the lawn, with numbers waiting to see you, that is probably a sign that it's time to get a real office. I mean, then people are going to start complaining, these people sitting on your lawn all day long, Cliff. They're customers, they're clients. When your brand image requires a physical location. I mean, we all know about a lot of big companies that started out in garages, but they didn't stay there. When it becomes clear that your brand image depends on having a real location, that's the time to get out of the home office. And then last but not least, when your spouse or significant other insists that you get out, either as part of a divorce or not. Sooner or later, there comes a time where your spouse's patience will be challenged. So you will definitely know when that happens. Okay. All right. Sooner or later, you'll be working out of a home office unless it's absolutely necessary. These are the key points. Unless it's absolutely necessary, don't see clients or customers in your home office unless it's absolutely necessary. 95% of your legal problems with a home office will disappear once you decide not to see clients in the home. Whether or not your home office is zoning compliant, it probably will not matter as long as you are invisible. The key is invisibility. That's the key to success when you have a home office. If you qualify for the home office deduction, you are crazy not to take it, but I would recommend you do not depreciate your home for tax purposes, because that creates problems down the road when you sell the house. Get a really good insurance person to help you get the right coverage, by the way. Not all insurance agents and brokers know about all the various types of home office policies. You want somebody who definitely gets that, speaks that language, and who knows the difference between a home office rider, which is property casualty, and commercial liability, which is slip and fall, or umbrella liability. You want somebody who knows the difference. And then, I always like to throw this in. This is a question I know you're dying to ask, but none of you will have the courage to ask it. So I'm going to answer it for you anyway. Cliff, if I have a home office, and especially if I've got inventory in the house, I'm an eBay seller or an Amazon third-party seller, can I deduct my dog as a guard dog? I'm sure that question has occurred to you at some point. I'm happy to say that I've been doing SCORE presentations since 1979, and this was the very first question that I was asked at the very first SCORE presentation that I did back in 1979. It was a guy who had a junkyard in upstate New York, and he wanted to know if he could deduct his dog as a guard dog. Okay, I have done extensive research on this, and here are the rules. Believe it or not, there's a whole set of IRS rules on this, believe it or not. Okay, first of all, not every dog qualifies. Certain breeds qualify and certain do not. The IRS says that to qualify as a guard dog, the breed or mix must have a natural propensity to violence. I cannot make this up. A natural propensity. Pit bull, yes. Pomeranian, no. Size does matter when it comes to dogs. If your dog is smaller than your inventory, it probably will not qualify. Or if your dog is so cute that he's the first thing that the crooks would take if they broke into your hot premises, that probably is not a suitable guard dog. Cats of any kind do not qualify. Although I will say that I think you ought to make an exception by this. But anybody here have a Yorkie, Yorkshire Terrier? You know what they are? They're these little rat dogs. They're about this big. They're covered in fur. These are mean little SOBs. Seriously, if you have 3 or 4 Yorkies in your basement, that is like having a school of piranha in your swimming pool. If the IRS agent goes down there, you close the door behind him, he'll be stripped to a skeleton in 30 seconds. Yorkies are vicious little dogs. I will share with you that when I was in high school, I had a paper route for 7 years, 90 private homes. They all had dogs, 6 days a week. Never got bit, only once did I get bit in all those 7 years by a Yorkshire Terrier. Mean little bastards. They ought to have a Yorkie exception to that, but I don't think that they do. I think size does matter, but seriously, a pack of Yorkies, I think, will be very convincing to an IRS agent. Not just one, you gotta have a couple, but that's okay. All right, cats do not qualify under any circumstances. Now, assuming you have a qualifying guard dog, okay, can you deduct it? Well, you can deduct the expenses related to the dog. Oh, by the way, also too, the dog has to be with your inventory. It has to be in the same physical space. So if your inventory is in the basement, but the dog is chained up in the backyard, that does not qualify. The dog must be guarding the inventory. That makes common sense. Okay, he's got to be in the basement with a chain, okay, or something like that, you know, or maybe not a chain. We'll have to work out something there. Can you deduct the dog? The answer is no. You can deduct the expenses. You can deduct the food, the vet bills, all of that, but you cannot deduct the dog yourself. You cannot deduct the dog itself. What you have to do, wait for it, you're not going to believe it. What you have to do, you have to depreciate the dog over its useful life. Now, what is the useful life of a guard dog, you may ask? Well, the IRS has an answer for that as well. The answer is, it is the average life expectancy of that breed or mix as determined in writing by a local breeder. You basically have to go to a local breeder and get them to write a letter saying, in my experience, this mutt is 39% Yorkie, 42% Pomeranian, 50% Pit Bull, and in my experience, this breed has a life expectancy of 7 to 8 years, and you take your depreciation deduction over that period of time. So that leaves you with one last question, which is, if the dog dies before its useful life, for whatever reason, must you recapture the depreciation deduction? I actually wrote the IRS a letter years ago asking for an explanation. They did not respond, which just shows you that even Cliff Ennico can sometimes push the IRS to its absolute limit of tolerance. But those are the rules regarding deducting a dog as a guard. Here's a good rule of thumb. If you are slightly afraid of the dog yourself, that's probably a good sign that you got a guard dog. Okay? If the dog is so cute that he's the first thing that the crooks would steal, I would pass on taking that deduction. I don't think that would survive scrutiny on audit. And that's it, folks. Those are the secrets of a successful home office. I've got more information here in 2 of my books, Small Business Survival Guide. In the eBay Seller's Tax and Legal Answer book, I actually have a whole chapter on the home office deduction, because virtually all eBay and Amazon sellers take the home office deduction. They all work out of their houses. So I got a lot more detailed information in that book for those of you who are interested. And with that, I will take questions and answers. Now you know that your dog is truly qualified as a guard dog.